I've been thinking about this kind of in the lead up to this event, and I've struggled to really try to find one. It's almost like that old Supreme Court decision on obscenity. I can't define it, but I know what it is when I see it. The lines between trolling and I think, harassment or even threatening behavior can get very blurry. But I think what sets trolling apart from those other types of kind of targeted behavior is a desire to try to, even if it's done in a really cruel way, the goal is normally some type of there's some type of satirical effort to it. There's some sense of humor, even if that humor is really from a negative or kind of violent place. But there's something that someone is trying to get out of that I think that at the very least they find entertaining. And I think that's where we can kind of try to narrow it down into some type of definition. Someone who does kind of abrasive or disruptive, destructive, or even harassing behavior, but for either their own entertainment or the entertainment of others.
Okay, that was good. Jesus, what do you think an internet troll is?
I don't want to go as specific as to say an internet troll, but I think a troll is someone that says or does things to get a reaction while protecting themselves and removing themselves from the situation so the other people are affected and their emotional capacity is protected.
That's a good observation. The reason I say internet troll, reading up a little bit on the history of how we've come to understand trolling and what the troll is, it had something to do with back in Vietnam and the bombers, and they had a thing that they called trolling, and that got passed down into the internet gaming and all the Dungeons and Dragons and things back in the 90s. And I think then it by that time really became an internet thing. So in my head I've just linked it now, internet trolling. But Malcolm, why don't you tell us your definition of an internet troll?
Sure. I also had a tough time. I think the interesting thing about internet trolling is it suffers from a similar lack of mutual understanding, right? There isn't really a checklist, kind of like the term terrorist or conspiracy theory, where it's pretty nebulous and can be used to disregard or insult when you're frustrated or genuinely feel like you're being attacked. For me, I thought a lot about it and took it to like a bigger thing. I made some notes for this because I'm a scatterbrained person. To me, I think the big thing ultimately is kind of like it's deception, and it's deception. That can be anything. That can be you being deceptive about how you really feel about something and creating a deliberately incendiary statement that you don't necessarily believe in. It can be you pretending to be someone else. It can be any lieu of things. Generally, it's someone, dropping a caustically hot take into otherwise calm waters, right? And it is usually what they don't believe. But ultimately, to me, what it really, really is it's designed to create chaos. And it's designed to break the order of an otherwise orderly event. When I started really thinking about it, the thing that actually, because I was trying to think of what does trolling, what are the if you could take it into the real world, what does it look like? And the weird thing, I thought it was streaking. Because it's ultimately what trolling is it's breaking the social contract of the internet. You're fundamentally snapping in half the social contract we've all entered into, almost the equivalent of running across a field completely naked and totally just taking away from what's happening.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but don't you think that now that we've lived through the Donald Trump White House years and we've seen trolling, magnified and drilled down upon, that it's something slightly different, or that it's there?
I think that it's being used with more intent But I think if you want to boil it down to its most basic elements, that's what it is. People just realize that it's also an incredibly potent tool for agitation or bringing people along, leading people to a certain area.
Molly, internet trolling.
Yeah, I mean, I really like what Malcolm said about breaking down order. I think that's really important. There's like trying to kind of undercut what is seen as, I guess, the norm. But I also think at the same time, there's like power plays into it in a certain way, like in a very, very broad definition. I feel like I would say that trolling is somebody trying to undermine another person's power, whether it's through like violent anger and things like that, or if it's through that more absurdist satirical type of action, or if it's through organizing, like all the people on TikTok organizing to sell out seats at that Trump rally, you know, things like that. But I think ultimately the goal is to undermine somebody's power, be it like positively or negatively.
Josh, what do you got? Give us your best troll.
Well, since I'm last, I don't want to necessarily reiterate, because I think I agree with what everybody said. So there's just two things I'll add to the mix, and one is I had thought of the word performance, and I think one of the interesting things is the internet as a whole is a very performative platform. I think everybody's performing on different levels. There's a lot of reasons for that. We're encouraged to in a lot of ways. I mean, it is media, right? So we're all characters on it. And then also the big anonymity factor, which is where a lot of trolling takes place, is what contributes to it. And so if you think about it through that lens as a performance, I think that a troll is intentionally performing as an antagonist, performing maybe not always satire, but I see it as satire, like a satirical role where you're often taking a position that you don't actually believe in order to represent something, usually something nasty, right? And then it leads to what was said about chaos and about breaking the social order and all of that. And then to respond to your point about, you know, what trolling means in the year 2021, I do think that like that chaos factor and that agitation factor is really about seeding distrust in institutions and distrust in everything, because then there is a means to an end to that, right? If we all don't trust anything, then it becomes a lot easier for a figure like a Donald Trump to actually have power, because if he becomes the single source of truth, then he can say anything and he can navigate through anything. And I think whether you're talking about a Donald Trump or you're even talking about just the dynamics within some sort of online community where you have just figures, let's say it's like a forum on bodybuilding or something like that, and you have your own little subculture and your own community within it, you can get trolls within those communities who, you know, some of them are just doing it for fun, but some of them might actually be doing it in order to seed that chaos, so there's that distrust, so that then they can put actual ideas out into the world that they hope people latch onto, that, you know, no authority backs up, no trusted sources back up, but that doesn't matter because we don't trust anything anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going to introduce everybody, having failed to do so at the beginning. Up on the big screen and hailing from who knows where, we've got Alex Kack, a.k.a. the green shirt guy, a.k.a. the guy who laughed his head off the city council in Tucson, Arizona. And next to him, we've got Molly Ragan, and she is doing her graduate studies on what's the topic, Molly?
It's called Strategic Design and Management at Parsons. It's bringing design thinking into business, basically.
Interesting. And to my right is Josh Belhumeur, my partner in crime at BRINK, and we've got Jesús Lucero and Malcolm Critcher. And They're both on the board of, actually, all three of us here, four of us are on the board of the BRINK Foundation. And this is a function of the BRINK Foundation. And the BRINK Foundation exists to weed out the destructive forces of the internet, call attention to them, and figure out ways to eliminate them. And okay, so now and I'm Danny Vinik. I am actually the executive director of the BRINK Foundation. And we're talking to you here live from Pidgin Palace Arts, our beautiful gallery in Tucson, Arizona. Almost, 1100 Cesar Chavez Avenue. And I could have tried to say that better, but I did my best. Okay, so let's get deeper into our topic tonight. And anybody grab it. Josh, you can grab this mic from me, and those guys can have that mic. And but here's where we're going to start. Have you ever been trolled? And a companion question: have you ever trolled somebody? Anybody?
Yeah, I do a lot of my trolling in real life now, which is a lot of fun. I see trolling as every day making decisions to choose violence and to choose something that's going to upset the norm. The way that I dress is a form of trolling. I think camp as a form of presenting is trolling. And so trolling takes up a lot of space in my day-to-day life. I do trolling online primarily through social dating sites. When people go on there trying to fetishize me as a trans femme person, I waste their time. I waste all of their time, their entire time. And I make fun of them. I fully make fun of them. And that's what makes me feel good. It's to make me feel good. I don't post it anywhere. I don't talk about it aside from this. And I think that's what trolling should be. I'm protecting myself in that because I'm still engaging with men in a way that's sexually gratifying to me, but I'm demeaning them and humiliating them and almost dehumanizing them and taking away their agency.
But when you say you do it, well, just clarify because I maybe didn't. You do it outside of the internet?
Yeah, I do it outside of the internet, and I do it on the internet as well, like on Grindr, on Tinder. Oh,
okay, I get it now. That makes sense. I've never been on Tinder or Grindr, and I always had a lot of curiosity. But I think it's my time passed. I think if I was in my 20s, I would definitely be on Tinder and Grindr all day long. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. But
user of both, I can guarantee you. Your time is not passed. As a user of both in Tucson and LA, you are in good company. I guess to go off of what Jesus was saying, I mean, I love your observation about camp as like an idea of like trolling. I guess like, you know, if we're talking about trolling as the subversion of the understood way of doing things or order, the notion of camp as a trolling of like the unified aesthetics of a medium. It's a very, very cool way to look at it. And honestly, I've never really gotten camp. And for some reason, that was like a big unlock for me where I was like, oh, that's actually a very cool way of thinking about it. I mean, the fun story I have about being a troll, I was telling Josh earlier today, which is my most recent experience with it is when there was the crazy PS5 shortage that occurred because everyone was buying, you know, I guess backstory for people who don't follow PS5 news as closely as me. During COVID, you know, there's a really big microchip processor shortage. And so like almost all the PlayStation 5s that got released, there's been a crazy, crazy shortage. You can't buy them anywhere. Lots and lots of scalpers aggressively sucked up 50, 100, 200 units and are selling them at these insanely inflated costs. And for whatever reason, a lot of them are in Tucson. There's lots and lots of people in Tucson who are selling, you know, have like 300 PS5s and are selling them all for $1,000. Then they sell them a lot on OfferUp and Craigslist. And when this started happening, I started just hitting them up and, you know, being like, hey, I want one. And I'd have them meet me, in a safe way up on the skyline, and I'd just see how long I could get them to stay there, where I just tell them I was coming, and I was coming, and I was coming. And I think it's an interesting thing because it's the same, we're both talking about the idea of, if you're going to use trolling as a form of civil disobedience on a peer-to-peer basis of people who have more power than you, the thing you can take away from them is time. It's the one critical commodity that we all share. And if you want to do almost like a peer-to-peer trolling effort, wasting their time is something that you can fundamentally drain from somebody as a resource, which is interesting.
I like this as kind of a brainstorming session on how to be better trolls, because you just gave me the great idea of having strange older men meet me 30 miles from where I actually am.
I was just reminded of, are you all familiar with I think it was the Jerky Boys? They used to make, you know what it is, Malcolm? No? No, they would make...
like prank callers, right?
Yeah, prank phone calls, and record them and put them out. And they were often hilarious. You got something?
Well, I wanted to have a dialogue with Alex for a second because I think one thing that's interesting is I feel like the meme that you became is almost like participating in involuntary trolling, where it's like you weren't trolling at the time necessarily. You might have been. I guess that's my first question. Yeah, were you genuinely laughing or were you trolling? Were you just playing a character, pretending to be laughing to make them feel marginalized and not understood and hurt and all of that?
So no, in real life, in that moment, I was just laughing. It was a chaotic scene, and it was, for lack of a better term, it was funny. To your second point, or I guess maybe your first point, was the nature of kind of becoming a meme and a reaction GIF. I think that is used so much to kind of troll, for lack of a better term. And I think it especially in the time that it happened, there's a real kind of almost trolling culture that had developed around kind of this kind of right-wing kind of anti-Trump thing on the internet, and it had evolved in a lot of really kind of different ways with a lot of different ideologies surrounding it. But a lot of people had kind of taken to the internet to just kind of screw with people or to make fun of them. And my likeness kind of became a default method. It still kind of is, I think, for a lot of people who engaged in that behavior. It's died down, obviously, since Trump himself has been banned from Twitter. But also, I think there were so many people that were kind of, in weird ways, were tent poles of that kind of trolling culture in the Trump years. Many of whom really were kind of, I think, playing a performative character for financial gain. When you think of people like the Krasensteins and stuff, who eventually themselves got kicked off of Twitter as well. It's a very weird thing because I kind of have a platform because of the use of my likeness by some people like that. And yet at the same time, the way that they approached it, how kind of, I don't want to say dishonest, but it certainly wasn't earnest, isn't something that is, I think, reflective of who I am as a person in many ways. So it is interesting to kind of see yourself be a part of something that can be really ugly. And trolling a lot of the time is obviously, I think, very negative or very ugly. It's not kind of an ugly behavior to engage in. I think as far as a form of entertainment, a form of humor, it is kind of in that, low common denominator, like slip on a banana peel, like laugh at someone else's harm, even when those people really deserve it and kind of have it coming. So it's a very weird experience to see yourself be a part of that. There are times that I'm very on board with it, but I think by the nature of just being in a Giphy keyboard, you're going to see yourself and your face attached sometimes to things that you don't necessarily agree with, or ways of speaking to people that you don't necessarily agree with. That's kind of, I think, at the heart of trolling as an art, if you want to call it as such, because it's a very kind of lawless type of behavior. To go back to Malcolm's earlier point about breaking social norms, it's very hard for me, I think, to go into a place and say like, oh, don't use my face in this way when it feels like it's part of the public record. But yeah, it leaves me with some weird feelings sometimes, certainly.
It makes me think a lot about like the intentions behind, like specifically, I think Josh, how you asked the question, like, was it your intention, Alex, to perform this laughter, or were you actually laughing? If we're looking at this 2 years later, does the intention matter? Does it only matter in the moment? Does it matter in the moment? Like, are you still engaging in a trolling kind of activity, whether you mean to or not? Like, I think that's kind of an interesting way to look at it too.
I think about that a lot. I'm sorry, Alex, to jump in super quick, but it's just something I was thinking about earlier today with the internet, where, I'm a firm believer if you make a piece of art, you're Andy Warhol, you make a piece of art, you drop it. What that means to people 50 years from then, it doesn't matter what you intended with it. It's now the public's opinion and an overall cultural formation that informs what that means. And in a society where literally the texts I send to my girlfriend can potentially be public record, the notion that anything we're doing that has a digital footprint has the capability of being shared hundreds of thousands of times. It's like almost anything we do on the internet has the capability of being completely beyond our control of what it ultimately ends up meaning, I think you've seen that with a lot of memes, especially like an early meme culture, where it was like a little girl being excited about a birthday present ended up becoming like the symbol of like Muammar Gaddafi being dethroned from power or something. Like, I feel like you end up seeing these very ridiculous moments early in the internet like that, where things that had at one meeting culturally get completely appropriated into something new.
Because trolling, in all these ways that we're talking about it, feels like it has some kind of gloating, lascivious, evil kind of intent, if you will. Does that travel with it, regardless of what the outside intent of the we're talking about ways in which maybe trolling can be good or be done for good, but it's still got that evilness attached to it, right?
So this was one thing that I thought was interesting with the green shirt guy meme in particular, and the conversation that followed, because I saw a lot of people asking on the internet, but like, is this how we should be responding to the alt-right and, white supremacy and all the scary stuff that's happening? It's like, just it's traumatic and it's horrible, but put on this face, laugh in their face, right? Make them feel like shit for their beliefs, right? And then maybe they'll no longer have those beliefs, or they'll start reevaluating, or at least they'll start being quiet about them again, because they don't feel like it's safe for them to do that. And I think if that is the conversation, it's a valid conversation. I thought it was an interesting conversation. I don't think there's a definitive answer on whether that's the right approach versus bringing it all to the light and then trying to address it directly. But my answer to your question within that context would be, I don't think there's evil attached to that. I think that's a purely virtuous conversation to have on how we can try to stomp out these types of horrible ideas.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my immediate reaction is that it's like, what you're looking at when you're looking at trolling is what you're looking at when you're looking at someone rioting. It's a single human being finding the one piece of agency they have in a system and using it to disrupt the system. Yes, that can be used for horrible, horrible, horrible reasons. Is it ever good? Maybe not, but the system we live in is far from perfect. If we were in a utopian system, I would say we can have a conversation about individuals harnessing the little tiny piece of power they have and using it out of anger. But until we get there, it's going to be a reality.
Who here has been the butt of a troll? I remember back when we first launched.
Yeah, I was going to say, ask the internet celebrity.
When we first launched BRINK as an e-magazine, and people could post videos and stories, audio anonymously, right? And there was a comment or some, I can't remember the whole way it played out, but there was something that was so terrible that I decided, as the the classroom monitor of BRINK to take down the post. So I just decided it was just such a bad, terrible thing to say, hate speech, whatever it was. And I took such personal shit for doing that. And people knew it was me because they could trace that I owned, however. And they directed everything very personally at me to the point where I got very, very confused. I reinstated the post, but it kept coming and coming and coming, to the point where it was like the cat was out of the bag, and now it was fun to troll Dan Vinik and his, editorship of BRINK.
I do think just one thing, and I know I've been talking too much, so I'm going to hand the mic out of my hand after this, but one thing to just think about there is what you opened this with, which was it's now 2021. How has the internet changed? Because what you're talking about is a time where not a lot of people use the internet. The majority of humanity was not on the internet, and that just sounds like cyberbullying and outraged anons, which I think like people who are on the internet a lot can know. The second you turn off people having any anonymity, you get to the darkest parts of humanity real quick. Like that is a guaranteed hotbed of just like people being the worst they can be because there's nothing tagging them to it. But beyond that, it's like I think the face of how we talk and think about trolling has changed slightly, especially once we've watched it literally get weaponized by corporations and those in power to sort of being a different conversation as opposed to like in the mid-90s, a bunch of dudes on a forum bullying the dude who runs the forum. Like I feel like it has grown beyond that as an experience. I'm interested in hearing from Alex. I mean, he was someone who got, internet famous overnight and probably, politically internet famous overnight. And I would assume that came with something that's interesting.
I mean, I don't necessarily want to monopolize too much here either, but yeah, I mean, of course, with what happened, there was a lot of trolling of me that came with that. And I think this goes back to something I said earlier and ties directly into the points that you guys just made, though, that the line between something like cyberbullying and harassment and trolling can be very, very murky and very nebulous to try to define. And I think it is, to kind of maybe counteract some of what was said earlier, or as a counterpoint there about whether there's a nature of evil attached to this behavior in general, even if it is something that is done righteously, the fact that it normally materializes as some form of harassment is central to it, I think. And so, when I don't know, this is kind of a little stream of consciousness and rambly, but I think I'm saying that because my first thought when you say, how did you react to whatever deluge of, internet crap came to you after going viral, it didn't really bother me too much, right? Even the really personal, the really nasty comments, things about the way I looked or threats against my family or whatever they were. I grew up as kind of like a chubby kid in Phoenix, so I was used to hearing that stuff in person, and it wasn't really that different. It's certainly not has less.
You were a chubby kid?
Oh, and believe it or not.
Well, that was my attempt to troll you. I was trying to troll you a little bit.
You saw it. The problem is, we might be online right now, but seeing it from someone I know feels different, Danny. So thanks for that. Thanks for body shaming.
I think it was a troll and a fail. That's what that was.
Well, I think the conversation about the line between trolling and bullying, is there much of a line between that? Does it exist purely on the internet? Does it exist in person? Especially if you think about the level of anonymity that people hide behind often with both of those things on the internet, with trolling and cyberbullying. And I would be curious, Jesus, you were talking a little bit about how you troll in person, and I would be curious how that kind of plays out for you when that anonymity physically just isn't there.
People melt away. They shrivel up, and it's like they've never been in a conflict before. It's the best feeling in the world to be on the offensive of that.
Does that have a different validation for you than trolling online?
Entirely. Okay, so there was this there was a situation at our protest where a guy kind of looked like he mustered up all of the strength that he had in the world to say, "All lives matter," to us chanting "Black Lives Matter" while we were marching by his house. And I heard that, and I like got off my bike, turned around, got in his face, and just started screaming "fuck you" over and over again. And then he was like, "Real intelligent, dude, real intelligent," and I just like was screaming obscenities and like tearing him down, and he backed off, right? Because people don't want to get into altercations, especially over something that they had to fight themselves over saying. It's really exciting to be on that side. It makes me feel like they know they should be embarrassed for the things that they said. Because they have conscience. Like, they're human beings too. They have those feelings, they have those thoughts. I bet it's not easy to believe the things they believe. I imagine it causes them a lot of pain. So at the same time of feeling anger, I feel a lot of pity. So that being able to see them in that perspective has given me the ability to see pity and to see sadness, not just anger and frustration with them and their worldview. It's kind of expanded how I see them.
I would ask though, I wonder, like, I feel like the person saying all lives matter is the one doing the troll in this situation, right? Because they're saying that to get a rise out of you, right? And that, they, obviously we all think lives matter, right? The reason they're saying that is specifically to get a rise out of you, right?
Oh, I think he was saying it just to say it. Like, you should have seen him. It was fucking adorable. He was like, I can't explain it to you. When someone knows what they're saying is just bullshit, essentially. He had a U of A shirt on. Like, it's someone who knew better. And seemed like he wasn't expecting my response at all. It was just some guy at his house, like, next to his wife. And he like fell back, right? Yes, he probably wanted a response, but he got more than what he asked for. I took back the power in that because I made him scared, and that was my point.
So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like in some ways you confronted the troll and then you beat him back, right? Troll. Yeah.
But he was trying to troll me.
Yeah.
I guess it's interesting to think about that, because in that situation, if we're talking about this idea of disruption of social contracts, right? Protests I went to last year very much felt like we are going to disrupt social contracts, because it's more, even property damage. It's like it's the lives that have been lost are more important than this property. We're deliberately breaking this social contract to bring attention to this. It's almost like you guys were disrupting a social contract, and then he's disrupting a social contract within a social, like it's like a weird infinite echo of social contracts being disrupted. I mean, screaming all lives matter at a group of people who are protesting is the equivalent of like taking your dick out in front of a group of people who are protesting. It's like, it's ultimately this like disruption of the social contract of like the present in a really odd way. Because it's not a reunification of order, right? There's nothing about that then brings it back to the original. It's like a doubling down.
What's tell me the difference between cyberbullying and trolling, and the difference between shit posting and bullying and trolling.
Sorry, I'm gonna go back to this other thing. There's this social contract. I like the way that you put it. That protesters need to be peaceful, and if you're a protester, it is your responsibility to not be peaceful. It is your responsibility to disrupt things. And if you're not out there actually making a disruption, you're not going to make any impact. There has to be concrete things that are being changed because of the things that you're doing. Things need to be disrupted, or else it's not protesting. You're marching. You're not. You're throwing a parade, is what I mean. You're just showing it to be flashy for your Instagram followers. If you're not angry enough to actually do something about it, what is it that you're trying to do? It's performative. I think if you're protesting in that way, it's not trolling. I guess if we're like trying to break down what different aspects of our life are trolling and aren't trolling, one of the questions that we haven't gotten to yet is if Donald Trump is a troll, and I don't think Donald Trump is a troll. I think he's a clout chaser. And a clout chaser is someone who just says things.
Clout chaser?
Yeah, it's just someone who says things to get attention, to get more of a platform. And you saw that happening when he was deplatformed. He started posting on a blog, and he started posting press release. Well, he would post press releases like all the time for everything, and people weren't paying attention to that. So then he would start saying outrageous things. His press releases started seeming like less press releases and just long tweets. And on his platforms too, again, the things would get more and more outrageous, just because he wants to get attention. And so long as he's fed, he's going to want more.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes me think of something interesting in the context of if we're talking about trolling, when we're talking about it at its best as someone who is so powerless within the system that they feel forced to rail against it with the little agency they have, right? To me, those moments, certainly when I've engaged in them, feel like a little bit of a scream into the void. Let's say I'm rioting. We're past protesting. I'm bashing in a Chase Bank window, and an NBC News exec walks up to me and says, "Dude, I love this. Let's make a TV show out of it." I'd say, "Fuck you, no." And the idea that Donald Trump used whatever we want to define what he did to ascend to, the presidency, to me inherently implies that it wasn't trolling, because he consistently just gained more and more and more power and was clearly using it. So to me, that then brings up this larger conversation of what's the differentiator between this thing we've established. It's like one person gaining agency and fucking Wendy's trolling the TikTok Twitter. Like, that is a different conversation to me.
Donald Trump comes from a kind of a long line of people. Roy Cohen, his lawyer, a man who invents. He was an aide to McCarthy, and they invented the concept that all publicity is good publicity, bad publicity is good publicity. They invented the idea of fucking with the press, and I think that whether or not Donald Trump rises to the level of a troll, which it sounds like you don't want to give him that, he is a manipulator of our thoughts, one way or another.
I think the difference for me is how I define trolling at the beginning is that you have to be separated from it. It has to be something that you're gaining from. You're doing it to disrupt, and you're doing it from, Donald Trump gets so hurt by people's responses to his trolling, and I think for that reason he'll never be a troll. He's a sad little man, just like the men I'm trolling.
Yeah, and back to my definition, I don't think he's putting on a performance. He's just reacting, but I like that definition of him being like this clout chaser and he's proof that clout chasing works in American society because it got him to the top, right? But I've always thought he's got one skill and one skill only, and that's he just deep down in his soul innately knows how to capture the zeitgeist in the moment and the vibe and constantly project and participate in media, right? Media as a whole. He's been doing it since the 70s. He did it when Forbes started putting out their billionaire list, and he made damn sure that he was on that list, whether it was true or not. And and it went all the way to The Apprentice, where it was basically a set. It wasn't real, but it was all just him knowing exactly how to participate in media. And I never really have seen it as performance. I've never seen it as him knowing or having that kind of separation of self from what he's doing. I think it's just he's a natural at it, and he rode it to the top.
Do we feel like trolling is seeking attention? Because when we're talking about like clout seeking and Donald Trump specifically, like he's actively seeking attention. He wants those eyes on him. He wants the media on him. And with trolling, I guess in the way that I am imagining it, like you're seeking attention from the person you're trolling or the community you're trolling. And then that makes me think more to this like bigger problem in technology and media where like those quick like quips of something are what get people to the top. Like the whole sensational content thing and how that really gets your content promoted in the algorithms because all these people are watching it. Like, is that part of the, I guess, the goal of a troll? Like, are they clinging on to that? Not to rhyme, I didn't mean to do that. But are they clinging to that kind of grabbing somebody's attention in trolling?
If I can jump in, I think it maybe is less about the, and this is what separates maybe someone like Donald Trump from, for example, the trolls who supported Trump, is I think that the difference is that engaging in the act of trolling isn't so much about seeking attention for yourself. Part of the reason you see some of these people do it, I think predominantly anonymously, it's about, I think, generating a reaction in other people. I think getting under their skin in a very specific way. And I think that there's probably lots of different motivations to do so, but I think that that's kind of sits at the nature of it, is it's less about getting the attention yourself and more about just like having that level of control over other people, be it other individuals or over a group. I don't think Donald Trump qualifies as a troll. I don't think that he really engaged in trolling, but certainly a lot of people did on his behalf. I think we saw that on the internet. There's, you can't throw a rock without finding some account that's, like a semi-sexualized bald eagle wrapped in an American flag that's like harassing some woman because she loves the vice president too much. Like, it's just, it's a really peculiar kind of like subculture and activity that people like, I think, engage in. But I think it's really hard to be a politician or a legitimate politician and also troll or be a troll, because I think the power dynamics there are just off. And I think the nature of what you're trying to accomplish is just very different.
It's the same as when companies try to troll. It's performative. It's sad. It feels wrong.
Even more than it being performative, to me, it's the same thing. We see an increasing conversation in this culture about the fact that, like, if someone with all the power is doing something to someone who's very marginalized, that's a different conversation than someone who's very marginalized doing something to someone with all the power. And to me, it's like, it's silly to think that, a deeply angry 40-year-old white man whose job was destroyed by, 90s policy, who's on the internet DMing Kamala Harris obscenities, the Wendy's Twitter and Rudy Giuliani can possibly engage in the same behavior. Like, that seems silly to me because they are on so many insanely different levels of power structure, and it feels like they merit at least two different terms between a completely average American and a company that's worth billions of dollars.
What about Rudy Giuliani? Is he a troll?
Rudy Giuliani's wilding, man. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
Rudy Giuliani just has dementia. Like, we can't even call it anything else.
Yeah.
He's living his truth.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just building on the one observation that, like, when brands do it or politicians, it's performative. To me, the logic that you follow with that means that there's some sort of social currency with performing, like being a troll, right? Where we appreciate it and we like it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it gives you clout.
Yeah. Clout. Okay. So to that point, yeah. So the clout chasers might perform trolling in order to get the clout, but that's not actually trolling.
It's not actual trolling.
All right, cool.
It's mimicking a troll. It's kind of, you can make as many fake Gucci bags as you want. You can get as good at it as you want, but you're never going to make a Gucci bag.
So, what is surprising to me is how, when we started this conversation, I thought we were going to talk more about how how hard it is to be trolled. And we ended up talking much more about how fun it is to troll. So, take me through it. What's like the cyberbullying and shit posting and those kinds of activities? They're unrelated to trolling, or there's some overlap?
I would say it's the same. I would personally say for cyberbullying and trolling, it's like how all cactus are succulents, but not all succulents are cactus. Like all of it to some degree is harassment. I think Alex is correct in that. Like to some degree, all of it is ultimately harassment. But I think that like cyberbullying is a blanket. Trolling is somewhere within that, is underneath that. But I think cyberbullying is just a larger term for harassment that can be, you know, everything from me making fun of my friend on our Slack channel to someone DMing me to harm myself every single hour for 3 years. Like, I think it can be really, really wide. Shitposting is just nihilism and absurdism on the internet. I would say is the simplest, shortest answer to that, is just nothing means anything, and here's a weird, hyperpixelated image of Peter Griffin to help reinforce that.
How about daring people to eat Tide balls? Or where does that fit in?
Yeah, I think that's trolling. I think that was trolling for sure. It was a really dark time for trolling, because people. What year was that? Was that like 2016? No, it was a while ago. That was a really dark time for the internet. That's when I think corporations really exploded, and every corporation. That might have been the year Wendy's released a diss track. That was like the dystopian time for the internet.
When Wendy's did what? What did they?
You haven't heard Wendy's like album? Yeah,
No.
They have like a diss track against McDonald's, and like it's really bad. Denny's. And Denny's had like an Instagram or a Twitter and an Instagram that would like Photoshop weird combinations together, like legs on pancakes and things like that. Which was like absurdist, and it was shitposting, and it was trying to be all these things, but because it was a corporation and it came behind this idea of making more money and promoting this thing, it wasn't true art.
Yeah, to that point about shitposting being nihilism, and then to your point, I think really it was, you know, memes started on the internet as a form of, it's like a shorthand, it's like an inside joke, right? Where it's just like, oh, we can pass this around, haha, we're in on it. Then when brands started being in on it and stuff, that's when I think the rise of shitposting came out of that, because it was like, okay, we're going to do things that nobody can like wrap their heads around, that they almost become, punk rock's a good term for it. Yeah.
Well, to me, it's like, you know, the thing with brands and memes, I was an early meme adopter. Like, memes got hot when I was like 16. I was very deep into meme culture up until I was like 26, 27. And like, the thing I always found super laughable about it with brands is it was born out of social media, because it's, you know, it's the equivalent of like, we're all cavemen and I'm like, here's my cool drawing, right? It's about me as an individual human sharing this like little quick piece of art I made. The notion that brands would ever be like, oh, let's do that. Let's start sharing quick pieces of art the fucking $500 million corporation made is like, of course we're going to laugh. The entire basis of it was authenticity and about seeing what each of your friends had to offer. And the moment it's a silly thing to think that you could enter that space as a corporation that is focus grouped by 60-year-old white men. Like, that's wild.
So the time you were 16 till 26, so a decade, will you look back at that decade and think fondly of it, or?
Yeah, well, I would say that memes infinitely narrow curved to my exact like deconstructionist absurdist sensibilities. Like, right when I deleted all my social media in the middle of COVID, it was like we were just infinitely narrow tailing into this like I said, is like I'd look at like a picture of Peter Griffin that was 6 pixels and laugh my ass off, and then I was like, okay, I need to go outside, and I deleted all my social media.
That was a quick reaction.
When did the Skittles campaigns come out? That was all like all the initial Taste the Rainbow things. Like, that to me feels very in line with like pulling from kind of the social media like use of like random and like awesomeness and whatever.
Yeah, there was an internet culture. There's also the Quiznos ads with the little like, yeah, those were mid 2000s. Those were pretty early, like pre-social media. Because social media, as we know it, I think started around 2006. That's when maybe 2000. Yeah, I mean, MySpace was around 2002 to 2000. Facebook rose up in 2006, but it became really mainstream. Yeah, 06, 08.
I feel like
you need to hold the mic.
I feel like the way I would judge modern social media is when it became, you don't go online, you go to a single website and scroll, and all of the BBC's on there, Fox is on there. You're not going to funnyjunk.com and BBC, and it's one joint that you hang out in. Your grandma's racist statement is right next to like Reuters studies. Like that's social media.
So modern social media is all about the news feed, basically, and the algorithms, right, that drove them. Pre news feeds, it was bulletin boards, so it's a completely different vibe. But there obviously was internet humor pre modern social media, and that's, you know, I don't know how to describe where that came out of and what that was, other than we gave this tool, this instrument for people to create, you know, to millions and millions of people, and so of course you're going to get like a wider diversity of you know, art and content.
Memes make us harder to market to. And I didn't realize that until you just shared this, but before, when I was on the internet, before I deleted all of my social media towards the end of last year, I was really, really into memes, just like doom scrolling on Instagram stories, looking at all the memes. And the ads that I would get for me were just totally like whack. Had nothing to do with my actual interest, but that's because of the memes that I was looking at were so expressionist. They were like pure emotion and nothing else. So there were things that like so many people could relate to, people that had no ideology that was actually connected to mine. So it made me a really hard person to market to. Now that I'm using social media in a totally different way, Instagram is really good at getting ads to me. Like I've bought things from Instagram ads probably 10 times in the past month, and I hadn't done that. I had probably bought one thing off of Instagram, like for the entire time that I had been on it. So that's just an interesting point you made me reflect on.
Yeah,
well, I think if I can jump in, Josh, I think part of this, to kind of go back to what we're talking about, is the nature of appropriation by, you know, consumerist activity or entities of, you know, whether it be, you know, attempts to troll or memes or shit posting or any of this, internet culture in all of its varieties and flavors is all about, you know, it's popular front and it's popular art forms. And the popular culture and pop art always informs brand marketing, for better or worse. I mean, that's kind of the point where any movement jumps the shark in a very real way, right? Is like, you know, it's not punk rock anymore as soon as you see it in an Audi commercial. So I think it gets kind of reductive to try to say, like, to group all these things of internet culture in together, because while there's a linear history to it, they're different and separate kind of artistic and cultural movements and moments, and the technologies that kind of drive them are all frankly different. The move from like Makeout Club and Friendster to MySpace to Facebook and Instagram has been driven by different software platforms and different algorithms and a different culture that's evolved both on and offline around them. But that's going to continue to inform, you know, capitalist kind of, you know, greed and desire to acquire. And more new things are going to come out in response to that as that kind of falls by the wayside. So I think there's an interesting kind of parasitic relationship to these things because they feed off of each other in such an antagonistic fashion, so cyclically. But to some degree, they kind of need each other to exist.
Well, we've been going about an hour now, and so we're going to wrap it up a little bit here. But if anybody thinks that we've forgotten to talk about anything, now's your chance. And I've got one last question that I'd like everybody to think about. Is trolling easier on a phone or a computer? Everybody's speechless.
I can jump in, although I just finished.
Go for it, Alex.
I think it's easier on a computer because of the built-in anonymity. And I'm going back to Jesus's point earlier that there's...
Wait. Why is a computer more anonymous than a phone?
I think there's something natural or almost like primordial about hearing another voice.
I think he means like if you're on Facebook
device.
on your phone.
Yeah, I mean the device, not talking on the phone. I mean,
you're not talking. So in my
is
head,
it easier to troll with the device, the phone? Does it lend itself to more trolling, or is it equal? Do people troll?
I see. Sorry. In my head, I went back to crank calls when you said phone. I was thinking about like, pardon me, I'm 30 now, so I was thinking about picking up the rotary and like dialing numbers out of the phone book and telling someone that their baby was missing.
I would say phone solely because my phone, I think that's when we started going downhill pretty quick. The second that I have the compendium of human knowledge in my pocket and also someone calling me a slur, like that to me feels like the most dangerous thing we've ever done with technology. And it's the thing where I can just be having a shitty day or drank too much caffeine. I open my phone and I see some boomer saying something dumb on a local news post on Facebook, and I say something I would, if you had given me 30 seconds to think, I wouldn't have said. And I think when I'm on a computer, there's at least an iota more intention.
Yeah, I think that observation, I've always said that, like, I feel like the advent of the smartphone is a very important milestone for generational divide. And so I'm an older millennial. And so when smartphones came out, I was in college. And so I didn't have a childhood experience with a smartphone. And because of that, I had a very different relationship with the internet, I feel, than younger millennials and Zoomers do. And so to that point, I don't think today, I would say there's a difference between how easy or hard it is to troll on the device, but I think the smartphone is the biggest cause for more trolling for sure.
Agreed.
More tabs on the computer, though.
Yeah.
Trying to run 9 trolls at once.
I gotta tell all of you, when you guys say punk rock, it kind of cracks me up because none of you were really born during punk rock.
Shorthands. It's the same way as like this is 9/11. We're not literally talking about 9/11.
What? People say that? Damn.
We're talking about punk rock as it has become an iconic. Punk rock has become like a cultural critique iconoclast of when a medium rebels against becoming commodified and commercialized. Rock and roll music was about Bob Dylan doing his vibe, and then it gets completely bought out by an industry that's designed to sell things to teenagers. People freak out, start tearing things off the walls. It's become a term for just when that occurs cyclically within art, I think, and culture.
Cyclically. Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts before we end this shindig? Well,
yeah, I think Generation Z is going to totally reconstruct what online interactions look like. TikTok is a space that's kind of curated by young people, or like created by young people, where things grow if young people decide it's going to grow. Things take off if people decide it's going to take off. And there are very strict things for how to like behave and how to do things on TikTok. Like you're not allowed to, if you're in certain spaces of it, be super like driven by aesthetics, because that's like seen like something for Instagram. And Gen Z has also like totally trashed bullying. Like if you're bullying, that's kind of a sad thing now, or like that's what I see. Like you actually get bullied if you're trying to bully somebody. So I think trolling is due for a transformation. It's been stale.
And to build on that, and maybe this is like pulling it back, what is the future? I think the reality of that is because Gen Z wants those authentic spaces. Every time a tech company builds something and then eventually has to monetize it, they're going to flock to the next platform. And we've seen it happen a bunch. Snapchat was the cool thing, and then they started flocking away, all of that, and it's going to keep happening. And it's going to cause this tech bubble where all these companies are consistently overvalued, but there's no value there. So look out for that. That's like the next bubble.
I also feel like, thinking again about the future of trolling, that it's going to look more and more like broad organized activity, especially we have this entire generation that's grown up with smartphones and the internet, and kids who are growing into themselves as adolescents on TikTok, and who can very easily just create community and create space with so many people who think the same as them. Like, I feel like we're going to see so many more like I had mentioned earlier, the TikTokers and K-pop fans getting all the tickets for the Donald Trump events. Like, I think there's going to be a lot more kind of those mass coordinated events as trolls.
What I'm really scared for is how kids that are actively being raised on the internet from infancy are going to be when they're older. People that are already seeing those Peter Griffin things that Malcolm is into. People that have been like staring, like, you know, like, what is that, Coco Melon? Like the babies watching the 70th Coco Melon thing on their iPad, because that's just like what kids do now. Or like
that was
really
one of my questions. How do we talk to
horribly
our children?
Sexualized versions of the cartoons and figures that they look up to, just available on YouTube constantly on these never-ending streams, like feeds of content that YouTube has given them access to. It's totally destroying their ability to like understand how people actually perceive emotion. If everything you're seeing online is just like distorted, destroyed, trolling.
I agree with,
I was just going to say that I watched Knives Out recently, that like movie that Rian Johnson made, and I found it very alarming that a massive Hollywood blockbuster, like there's a joke in it where there's like a 10-year-old boy like a 10-year-old white boy, and his character's joke is that he's based and racist because of the internet. And it's like, that is now such a like cultural zeitgeist thing that like a major Hollywood film is making a joke about it, assuming that they focus grouped it, and half the theater was like, oh, totally. I know a 10-year-old fascist. And it's just like, how is that already happened that quickly where the majority of Americans can laugh at that as a bit?
I just wanted to point out, they said TV would rot our brains. I think it did. I think where we're at now is because of that.
Oh, yeah, brother.
So yes, we already have evidence. Like, these are all just, it's media, right? But this is just a different type of media, and it's a lot more interactive and immersed, but it's still just media. And whatever TV did to us, which to me led to a generation that elected Donald Trump, now what's the internet going to do to us in the future? It's pretty scary.
Well, the difference between TV and the internet is that the internet has these algorithms to feed us things that shoot us down these rabbit holes that are going to get us directly to fascism, instead of just being stuck at center. Like TV is going to show us down the center, centrist stuff, CNN, NBC, like those are actually conservative news sites, but like not Fox News conservative. And even Fox News conservative isn't as conservative as the things we're going to get on the internet, and the things that are yet to develop on the internet from those 10-year-old fascists. That's what's really scary.
I wanted to ask you guys a question.
10 companies control everything I learned.
And this is a question you guys can't relate to, I realize now as I'm watching you. But how do we talk with our children about trolling, if you had children?
I'm choosing not to have children. And I think that I'm saying that because that's one of the reasons I'm choosing not to have them. Sorry to be so depressing with that, but if I did have children, I would not let them on the internet, period.
Yeah, I think if I were to raise children, I would raise them without computers.
tied up in a closet somewhere.
Really short answer, same. I mean, I've been exposed to like a pretty fair gamut of kids over the past like 5 years, I'd say, and the ones that I see that are the brightest and most engaged are ones where their kids can kick and scream, but they are really strict, more than my parents were, about accessing screens at all. And other than that, I'd say I'd talk to my kids like they were adults. I mean, kids are crazy smart, especially now, whether or not they have access to the internet. Kids, I feel like I talk to 6-year-olds and they're like smarter than me. Like it's wild how smart kids are now just through like everything.
Okay, I think parents have to take responsibility for their kids becoming fascist because they also don't challenge that perspective. Like they're just like, oh, he's a kid, he doesn't understand. And they don't actually like sit there and explain like this is the historical context and this is the reality of things and this is why the things you're learning on the internet are actually lies. And people don't take the time to do that with their children. And once, if the children that I raise ever live to become teenagers, then we'll have that conversation. And I'll be like, these are just people out there trying to get a rise out of you. Like if you want to be cathartic and get that out there, go for it. Use your agency. Like let that be your voice. But also know that you're never going to change these people's perspectives.
Okay. On that note, I think we need to cut this off because it'll be too long of a piece, and we'll decide that we made too.
For next time.
It is a cool topic. Yes. And I think one of the things that I'm really interested in from the BRINK Foundation point of view is how do we talk to our children about trolling, and if we could come up with even some content that would help parents today talk to their children about trolling, I think would be very valuable content, and we should all think about it. Maybe we could. Maybe there's something we could do. And on that note, I think I will say goodnight to everybody. Alex, thank you. Molly. Malcolm, Jesus, Josh, signing out. Is that enough of a sign out?
I guess so.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good Friday.
Yep.